Well, hello, everybody. I got a treat for you guys today. I am here with Kyle Tait, who is the narrator for Behind Enemy Lines, the first book in the Titus Black series. And we're going to talk a little bit about some narration, audio type things. I know a lot of you guys are listening to books now and looking for content. And Kyle is a new voice to some of my books. I've had some other guys who've been narrating before, but Kyle's new, and I'm super excited about having him, be part of this this journey with this series here, and looking forward to what you guys think about it. So before we get started, we'll have a fun live reaction here with Kyle as I'm playing his own stuff. I don't know. I hate reading my own stuff sometimes. He might not, I don't know if how he likes to listen to it or not, but here's Kyle.
I've heard my own voice so much in my life, it doesn't even faze me anymore.
Okay,
but I just hope you picked a good section where I don't sound terrible.
Oh, no, this is great. I've actually got you doing some accents and everything. And just to set the scene, this is the first chapter. So it's not going to spoil a lot from the book, but this is the first chapter where Titus Black is breaking out Captain Watkins from a Russian prison. So here, I'll just play this and we'll go.
Black and Watkins were nearly invisible as they meandered calmly through the frenetic activity. After a brief search, Black located a Jeep with the keys in the ignition. He ordered Watkins inside, keeping up the charade that he was a Russian soldier. The ruse was working so well that Watkins still didn't seem to know who Black was. "Where are you taking me?" Watkins asked. Black flashed a wry smile. "I'm getting you out of here." Watkins grabbed Black's arm. "Who said I want to leave?" "We don't really have time for this," Black said, as he turned the key, igniting the engine. "Sorry you went through all this trouble, but I'd rather stay." "You'd rather stay in a remote Russian prison?" Black asked with a furrowed brow. "I believe this might be the worst case of Stockholm Syndrome I've ever come across." "It's not Stockholm Syndrome. I just know who you're taking me back to, and those people are going to kill me." "Not as long as you're with me." Watkins tightened his grip on Black's arm. "You can't protect me forever." He glanced down at Watkins's hand. "I suggest you let go of me, so we can get out of here." Black eased onto the gas and made his way toward the gate. "I'll tell the guard who you are," Watkins said. "I'm not going back." Black stopped the vehicle and glared at Watkins. "You're going to keep your mouth shut, or else I'll shut it for you." "Pomogite!" Watkins shouted as he leaned out of the Jeep and tried to get the attention of a nearby soldier. Black snatched a fistful of Watkins's collar and yanked him back inside before headbutting him. Watkins squawked in pain before Black slammed his asset's head into the dashboard, knocking him out. The guard cocked his head to one side as he stared at them. Black sneered as he looked at the soldier. "Americans."
All right. That's great. I like the Russian. That was wonderful. Now you know you got a guy that's going to go the extra mile. So, well, welcome, Kyle. Thanks for coming and chatting today a little bit. And I know you had to get dressed up. I got dressed up. I haven't been to church in a month, so I had to wear a collar for somebody. But thanks for taking time to come today.
Well, it's the first time I've worn a collar in probably 2 months. And I told you off mic before the interview started, I tried to gel my hair for this, but I haven't had a haircut in 2 months either. And so it was a disaster. My hair is longer than it's been, I think, probably since college when I had Ringo Starr hair. So it's been a mess under quarantine. But, as you play that, I love that you chose a Russian accent segment, because Russian is one of my favorite accents to do. And I have another author that I work with, Cap Daniels, who loves to challenge me. It's become a running joke in a series that I narrate for him, the Chase Fulton series. We've done 7 books together now, and every book, the Russian gets progressively harder, where he'll write 3 or 4 sentences in Russian just to challenge me and see how I can do it. Now, I'm not fluent in Russian, so I have to actually find a fluent Russian speaker and say, record this sentence for me, and I'll do my best impersonation.
All right. Well, let's get started, Kyle. People ask me these questions all the time, like how I got into writing. So I'm going to ask you how you got into narrating and kind of what precipitated you, becoming a narrator for books.
Yeah. So I got my start actually in a little bit of a different voice application. I was a play-by-play broadcaster in minor league baseball for 6 years. I went to Georgia Tech and called Georgia Tech baseball on their student radio station for 4 years. And then I worked in the Atlanta Braves minor league system with their AA team out in Mississippi for 6. And one off season, I had a radio friend of mine who said, I've got an audio engineer who's looking for audiobook narrators. How would you like to try it out in the off season? And so he put me in touch with this guy, and I started working with various independent authors. And then about 3 years ago, I signed on with my first major publisher. And from there, it's just taken off. And I left baseball in 2016 to get into narration full time. And that's where I am now. So I still do a little bit of sports work on the side, but I kind of went from full-time sports and part-time narration into full-time narration and part-time sports. I also work for TCU football and basketball. I'm on their radio network hosting their pre, post, and halftime shows. And I actually do that from my home studio right here where we are doing this interview. So that's pretty cool that I don't actually have to go to Fort Worth. I can do it, from here in Atlanta, live on their radio network. So I kind of get the best of both worlds. I get to do sports and narration, and it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah. Now, do you miss, or I guess, how much do you miss that versus narration? Is there part of you that's like, oh, I miss play-by-play, or, it's like great to sit in my little phone booth and read books. So
yeah, sometimes I miss it. But I miss the personalities of players and coaches and scouts and GMs. And I miss being at the ballpark at 2 and 3 o'clock in the afternoon, because that's where the real fun in baseball happens. That's where the conversations and just getting to know people that you don't typically get to know just watching them on TV.
Mm-hmm.
I don't necessarily miss being on the air every night. I've got a wife and 2 kids, and in fact, a newborn now 10 days old. So if any time during this interview I'm speaking nonsense, it's because we have a brand new child, and I haven't gotten much sleep the last couple of days. But this life is a lot more conducive to family life. I don't travel nearly as much. In baseball, we called 140 games. 70 of those were on the road. And so I was gone a lot. And now I get to tell stories from my booth. And another thing they're very different vocal applications too. In sports, sports are exciting, and I'm going to push it out to you, and you're going to hear why this is exciting. And so it's very over the top with your voice. And with audiobooks, it's much more nuanced, and it's very quiet, and it's an intimate one-on-one experience, because it's almost like, as I talk into this microphone, it's like I'm talking directly into a person's headphones or directly into their ear. And so I really enjoy the difference. People think, oh, radio versus voiceover, they're kind of the same thing. They're really not. It's 2 very different things. There's a lot more acting in this, and it's responding to the words that authors write. And so it's a new application that I've kind of had to learn and get out of that old, like, sports, this is exciting, hey, hear what I have to say.
Mm-hmm.
So
now, did you ever do any acting when you were growing up at all, or not?
Not really. I was more of a I know I don't look like it. I have kind of a nerdy look to me, but I was more of an athletic.
We went to Georgia Tech, so.
Right, exactly. Glasses are required to get into Georgia Tech, I think. But yeah, I was more into the sports world than I was the acting world. But this is a beautiful new application, and it's a skill that I never knew that I had. Even in a lot of the nonfiction books that I do, that's still acting. It's still putting yourself in the shoes of the author, and it's acting as one character, basically, for a 10-hour book. And I've done nonfiction books in subject matter that I don't know what I'm talking about, but at the end of the day, I have to act like I sound like I know what I'm talking about, because it's not me reading it, it's the author reading it. I'm trying to channel the author through me. So that's where acting comes in nonfiction books too.
Yeah, that's good. Well, now, were you a big, somebody asked you to do this, you're like, hey, this is a cool way to use my voice, to do something in the off season, but were you a big book reader before this? Did you consume a lot of books? Like a lot of the readers out there, read so many books, 2-3 books a week, some people a book a day. Were you like that growing up, or not?
Certainly not a book a day. But I did, being in minor league baseball, spend a lot of time on buses. So you pass the time however you can. And that ended up being reading quite a bit. And then in the off season too, I caught up on a lot of reading. But I wouldn't say I was a voracious reader. I'd probably read maybe 2 books a month. And I read a lot of news though, and I've always kept up with, I'm a researcher, and that really played well in the baseball world too, because doing a broadcast, it takes a lot of research and storytelling. And You have to know everything about every player on both rosters going into a broadcast. And so I think that's where my reading really came in, was my research that I enjoyed doing. And there's a lot of that too in audiobook narration. For nonfiction, it's looking up pronunciations. For fiction, it's going through and reading the book beforehand and finding out accents, like knowing that a character, for instance, in the clip you just played, is Russian, figuring out how to say the Russian words that are put into books. Finding out on page 170 that a character has a Southern accent, and so you better give him one on page 2 when he first shows up. Stuff like that. There's a lot of research in audiobooks as well, and I think that's where my kind of voracious reader bone comes in.
Yeah, that's great. Well, what's tell readers that are watching today, what's kind of your process for? I mean, you kind of mentioned that just a little bit briefly, but what's your process before you go to read a book for recording?
So I always read through it. It starts about 2 to 3 weeks before actual narration. That can vary just depending on lead time for when I get the manuscript from publishers or what have you. But I read through it about 2 to 3 weeks before I actually start narrating. And what I'm looking for specifically in that pre-read is, like I mentioned a second ago, I'm looking for accents. I'm looking for character descriptions. I'm looking for anything that can put me into the shoes of that character, because I'm just one voice. But as I'm reading a book like Behind Enemy Lines, I'm not just the omniscient narrator or the omnipotent narrator. I'm Titus Black. I'm all these different characters, and you have to be able to switch seamlessly from character to character in a dialogue scene. And it took a lot of practice, honestly. My first 20 books, I really didn't do that well.
Mm-hmm.
But now what I do is I pre-read is I take meticulous notes through that first read of, this person grew up in Georgia. She's in her mid-30s. She's tried throughout her life to get rid of the accent. So that tells me as the actor to try to make the accent a little bit less pronounced.
Mm-hmm.
You pick up on various cues on how the author writes, and it's a different experience with every author. Every author writes differently. Some are very in your face about the character descriptions, and then other authors are more subtle about it. And you have to sort of read between the lines and see, okay, what did they intend when they wrote this character?
Right. Now, did you have when you're doing Behind Enemy Lines, did you have a favorite character that you got to do at all in there? Or was there any that like stood out to you that you enjoyed?
I think it's the easy cliche, but I related well to Titus Black.
Mm-hmm.
I just have a very deep, a narrator friend of mine calls it boiling nails in my throat. He said that's what my voice sounds like. It's a very graphic description, but I can't get out of that depth down here. It's like my voice just comes from my chest. And so with that, I just felt like Titus Black was just this incredible badass character, and he just was very, very, and so I related well to
That's
that.
great.
Yeah.
Well, Dwight Kuhlman, who does the Brady Hawk series, he likes J.D. Blunt. This like, he was really
for sure.
The Texas senator. He just really liked that guy and how he was. But he really got mad at me after. I think most people on here probably have read through this part of the series. I think after book 2, where J.D. Blunt dies, I got a note from Dwight who was really mad that I'd killed off J.D. Blunt. I said, "Don't worry, I'll send you book 3 so you can stop complaining." See what happened. But anyway, it was a lot of fun. So it's always interesting to hear what you guys think about certain characters and that sort of thing.
I will say I also really enjoyed voicing, and this is weird, but I enjoyed voicing Tatiana too, because that was a that was a new application for my voice, an adolescent Russian feel. I don't know how well I did it. I mean, maybe you can grade me on that, but it was a new challenge for me that I really, really enjoyed doing.
Yeah. And that was interesting. That's, and especially in that story, I don't always do a lot of the point of view of, one of the, I don't know, antagonist, I guess, if you will, in the story, but, a lot of it. But with her, I don't know, I liked it. And my editor she really related to that character a lot,
Yeah.
as well. So we won't spoil that, but if you haven't, read it, I think you did a great job with that. So just by the way, thumbs up.
Good.
So let me ask you this
for compliments there.
You got one, you landed one. So let me ask you this. What do you, or do you do? I mean, like sometimes when you're in a field and you're doing stuff all the time, you're like, I want to do something else. I don't want to do, but what do you like to listen to if you listen to books?
I do listen to books. I
Okay.
listen to quite a bit. And I think that goes back to my sports broadcasting days too. I like to listen to other broadcasters and see how they handled certain situations. It's the same thing in audiobooks. I like to listen to people who are established narrators, who are quality with their accents, who have an acting background, because that's not a world that I came from, like we talked about earlier. So I like to listen to people who do amazing accent work, for one, to see how they handle various characters in various situations. Um, but I like to listen to the types of books that I narrate a lot. I listen to thrillers to try to get better and try to improve my own craft. And then on top of that, I listen to a lot of nonfiction. I listen to sports books because I do narrate a lot of those as well. And I kind of bounce around too. I'm usually listening to one nonfiction book and one fiction book at a time. Right now, I'm listening to, given what's going on with the global pandemic, this is fitting, but I'm listening to Stephen King's The Stand,
Oh,
which was
nice.
narrated by Grover Gardner, who is a legend, both narrator and producer for Blackstone Audio. And it's a 47-hour book, so I don't know when I'll finish. It's a really long one, but
Right.
I guess we all have plenty of time now. But so I'm listening to that right now, and then I'm also listening to a book about the Washington Nationals World Series run last year, narrated by a friend of mine, Angelo Di Loretto, who actually just narrated a book with another baseball book. But it was all about the Nats World Series run. I'm blanking on the title right now, but it was by Jesse Darty, the beat writer for the Nats. So I like to switch back and forth when I'm in a nonfiction mood or in a fiction mood. I kind of vary what I'm listening to based on that.
Yeah, that's good. Well, what's and I was, and I mentioned this earlier, but I mean, do you like to listen to yourself read books, or are you just you're just like, I'm done with that, don't want to hear it?
Yeah. Yes and no. It's a hard question to answer because I don't mind hearing my own voice. That's the first thing that people, when they first get into audiobook narration or radio, they're like, "Oh, I don't like the sound of my own voice." I've heard my own voice so many times now between radio and audiobooks that it doesn't even faze me anymore hearing myself. But I do like to listen so that I can see how well I handled a certain situation. But usually once I send the final files off to the engineer, I never listen again, because at that point, the book is done. What's out there is out there. I've done the best job that I can in that moment. And, I just have to send it and forget it. And if I feel like maybe I fell short on an accent or a character or something like that, I start over with the next book in the series and try to do better the next time that comes up. But um, so I do like to listen to myself for improvement's sake, but
Mhm.
that's usually as I'm recording that chapter, I may say, that 4 or 5 minute stretch came out a little flat. Let's go back and listen to it just to make sure that I hit it well. And
Mhm.
if I didn't, then I can always go back and re-record it. But once it's sent, it's done, it's for sale, and we just move on.
Yep, that's good. Now you had mentioned earlier that you do some other stuff. Books for independent authors, and you might have some of the readers on here who kind of read in that like prefer those types of authors. Who are some of the ones that people may or may not know about that are thrillers that you mentioned? Cap Daniels. Who are some other ones
Yeah.
that you've narrated for?
Yeah. So the two big series that I work on, are Cap Daniels. He's the Chase Fulton series. I think he's come out with 9 books. Book 10 is on pre-order right now in that series. And I've narrated 7 of them now, working on book 8 here in the next couple of months. And then Michael Lister is another author based down in Florida. And he writes the John Jordan series. His series is 23 or 24 books long, and we've done probably 5 or 6 of them now. And he wanted to go back. The series started way back in the early 90s, and
Oh,
he wanted
wow.
to go back over the entire backlist and do all those again. So I actually just finished book 1, but then we also have later books in the series. They stand alone. They're very similar to, say, Jack Reacher or something like that, where you can pick it up anywhere in the series and not miss anything. But so we have books 21, 22, and 23 done, and now we're going back and doing 1, 2, 3, and the rest of the series on through.
Oh, wow.
So Michael Lister and Cap Daniels are 2 that I'd really say are top of line. And
Yeah.
then in terms of nonfiction, I work for a number of the big publishers out there, and with given my background in baseball and in sports, I've done a couple of sports titles recently that were really a lot of fun. The book I just mentioned that I did with Angelo Di Loretto was a Lou Gehrig memoir, called The Lost Memoir by Alan Gaff. And they went back and found one of Lou Gehrig's. It was a serialized newspaper memoir that he wrote that was only published in random places in the Pacific Northwest and in Canada. It wasn't even published in newspapers in New York. So it was lost for years. And Alan Gaff went back and found it, got it ready for print, and then wrote his own little biographical essay. So Angelo did the portion that was written by Lou Gehrig, and I did the portion written by Alan Gaff. Yeah.
Well, I really appreciate you taking time, and I know you're busy and you got lots of other books to record, but I appreciate you stopping by and chatting today, and hopefully, our readers will connect with your voice and like your portrayal of, it's kind of funny because we do have, because there's this crossover between Titus Black characters and the Brady Hawk series. Titus Black kind of shows up near the end of the series, probably in the last 4 or 5 books he's been in for Brady Hawk, and then you have some Brady Hawk going in with helping out Titus Black, and so it's fun. So readers who's been listening to the first series will enjoy a different change, different voice, and like to see how you portray some of the characters as well. And but I think it's great. I think you did a great job, and super thankful that you're helping out on this series.
Behind Enemy Lines was it was a great change of pace for me, because that first scene that you played earlier in the interview was an incredible way to open up the book. Mm-hmm. And that it got me fired up. As I'm pre-reading, I'm reading this scene and I'm like, oh, this book is going to be good. So I'm excited to get to book 2 here in the next couple of weeks or months, and get that thing out for sale. But I really do hope that people enjoy Behind Enemy Lines. It was such a fun book to narrate. And RJ, I got to give you credit. Your character development and everything, especially to be able to cross over multiple series and have characters come through the way you do. It's remarkable. So that makes my job as a narrator so easy, because I can go back, I can read and listen to the other books and hear how the other narrators have dealt with certain characters and situations. And it's so fun for me to narrate books like that, because there's just such a depth to your characters. So I appreciate it. And man, this was a lot of fun. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, thank you. And we'll look forward to some more Titus Black books coming your way.
Yeah, no doubt.
All right. Well, thanks so much, Kyle. We will talk to you soon.
Thank you.